Hello again, folks. Welcome back. Yes, thanks to a couple of my viewers for their helpful comments on my previous Sv3rige videos. And one of the viewers kindly pointed out this video of Sv3rige, 99% of people are retarded. There is a pentagram in the background, and I think this is what he's talking about. This, in the Bigfoot world, is called a ground glyph. And they're very fond of this, either a cross or a trident or other kind of shapes, like there's like an A shape they do. This is either done by the druids, the witches, or the wild men, the woodwuss, Bigfoot creatures that are supposedly doing it. Now, this one here, this is by a video by Sv3rige up in Canada, and he gets some very good pictures of Bigfoot. And this is the introduction to his video, and he talks about the raven. The raven, this type of Bigfoot, the Kiwakatan, scavenges for its food like the raven and crow, and rotting human flesh has now become preference to the beast. So it's scavenging on rotting human flesh like a raven or a crow. This is the Shiva principle, because Shiva annihilates dead matter, or the unconscious, or the ignorant. The raven and the crow, therefore, a symbol of the Shivites. I showed before that Sv3rige is wearing a crow t-shirt, and he's sitting right in front of a TP structure. Just circumstantial evidence, people. Yes, thanks to P. Miller for that. Now, Kanapa, this is a staunch devotee of Shiva from the old Vedic literature of India. A hunter, again, like Bigfoot. And this is exactly the same description as Esau from the Bible. Esau was covered in hair. He was a hunter, and he lived out in the forest wherever the deer were found. That was his favorite prey. So Esau was the ancestor of the Edomites. The Edomites are depicted, I think, they are underground dwellers. They live in caves underground, and they were depicted by Michelangelo in his, I think it was a picture of the end of the world or something like that. He showed the Edomites as hairy, Bigfoot creatures living underground. Ravan, or Lavan, is a character from the Ramayana, a devotee of Shiva. Interesting that he should be called Ravan, like Raven. If you look up General McRaven, there's a famous picture of him doing a Illuminati hand sign. This is a very important detail to make note of. Ravan expressed a desire to marry the wife of Rama. Rama presumably a type of human, and Sita, his wife, a beautiful female human. And Ravan, who I'm saying is probably an Edomite or a Bigfoot type of creature, he tried to abduct her. Well, we've heard this story time and time again from the Native American Indians. They say that the Bigfoots try to abduct their women and marry them, or, in other words, mate with them. Another interesting detail here, they're saying that Ravan means roaring, and they can't figure it out why it means roaring. Well, I would suggest a lion roars, so that's the Lion of Judah. The sun, well, that's Shiva. He's the destructive aspect of the sun. And Bigfoot roars, doesn't it? Look up Bigfoot vocalizations on YouTube. Just as a quick aside, in case any of you had any doubt that these people who appear to be just sort of random weirdos on YouTube have connections with high up Illuminati behind the scenes, because it's all a secret society. They all know each other. They're all hugging and kissing behind the scenes. What does this say? Santos Bonacci and Darrell Wood were a warm-up act for Microsoft founder Bill Gates in his keynote speech at Comdex Fall, America's biggest IT trade show. So somehow this random busker from the shopping center in Brisbane or wherever he's from got this gig working for one of the richest men in the world. How the heck does that happen? And here we have on Mr. Astrotheology's latest live stream. What do we have in the comment section of the chat? Well, maybe he will read this and forgive the whole thing, and we will all be able to stand strong against the Gates Foundation. Yeah, so these are his handlers in here. Don't believe for a minute that these people care about Santos Bonacci. If they cared about Santos Bonacci, they would see his failing health, and they would see that he's dying from veganism, and they would all petition him and beg him and encourage him to get a life and start eating meat and get his health back together. They don't care about him. They're happy for him to become a martyr. These are his handlers. These are all part of a weird network behind the scenes, egging him on and pretending to be enemies of Bill Gates, their patron, Santos's boss, Bill Gates. It's fake opposition. So on the right here we've got the Bill Gates Foundation, and look at the other messages here. Acting as the zodiac character, happy solar return, of course, and all the planets of Capricorn, blah blah blah. Of course, they're astrologers, right? Mr. Astrotheology. Who wrote all the astrology books? Lavan. It said in that. We just saw it, right? He says all the attributes and the achievements of Lavan. He's famous for writing the Hindu astrology book. So he wrote the book on astrology. Of course, it all ties in with Mr. Astrotheology. These people are Sabians, they're star worshippers, astrologers. Now, on the left here, we've got an excerpt from Charles Vallancey's book about pagan Ireland. And it says, to prove the Irish of that age to have been pagans, under the Brehon laws, living like wild beasts of the woods, drinkers of the blood of animals, and eaters of raw flesh. So he's saying here, this is what qualifies them as being pagans, drinkers of blood of animals, eaters of raw flesh, and living like wild beasts of the woods. Well, that's Sv3rige. We're back on Charles Vallancey. This is Collectania de Rebus Hibernicus, and this is the chapter on Halloween. So just want to go through this a little bit. In Hebrew, chug, meaning the paschal lamb, chugel, or worshipping of a god as the creator of the universe. If you remember, in my film on BitChute, Religion, the Horrible Truth, we have a Jewish rabbi there telling you about the importance of sacrifice in worship of God. He says the two things are synonymous. Worship and sacrifice are the same thing. You worship through sacrifice. So this is why hug means sacrifice, and ul will mean al or God. Okay, that's all well and good. Rabbi Moses thus describes this superstitious worship. This is the Druids. They gathered together blood for the devils, their idol gods, and then they came themselves and did eat of that blood with them, as being the devil's guests, and invited to eat at the table of the devils, and so were joined in federal society with them. And by this kind of communion with devils, they were able to prophesy and foretell things to come. According to the opinion of this rabbi, they thought their demons esteemed it such a favor and obligation to be treated in this manner, that they would, in the wild open places where they haunted, and which therefore were made choice of for the performance of these superstitious rites, appear visibly to them, and foretell them anything they had an inclination to know. This is a Jewish rabbi describing the worship of the Druids. Important points to take from this. They gathered together blood for the devils, their idol gods. So whatever these devils are, they worship them as their gods, and they like blood. And then they came themselves and did eat of that blood with them. So both the Druid priest and God consume of this blood. So please notice, so far we have perfect correspondence with the Jewish religion, because the Jews, they have a barefoot priest perform a ritual blood sacrifice for God. He feeds his God, Jewish priest feeds his God the blood, because his blood, it's needed. And in Christianity, Jesus Christ was the paschal lamb. He was sacrificed. His blood had to be spilled for God to make a covenant with man. Because the eating of blood, remember the video I made before? The eating of blood was to ratify every contract, every covenant had to be ratified by the eating of blood. It's called the Brit Milah in Hebrew, and in the Irish Druid language, Gaelic, it's the same word anyway, it's spelled pretty much exactly the same. So perfect correspondence so far between Druidism and Judaism, and also looks pretty much like what Sv3rige is doing out there in the woods too. I wonder if he's barefoot while he's doing it. I'll have to have a look for that in the video, see if there's any evidence. As being the devil's guests, and invited to eat at the table of the devils, and so were joined in federal society with them. So they were communing with these devils, they were physically present. I mean, a spirit can't eat blood, can it? If a spirit is non-material, how can it eat material? So these devils were attracted to the presence of blood, and so were joined in federal society with them. That means they had an alliance, a kind of social contract, some kind of, it says here, an obligation. They were in league with these devils, whatever they may be. I'm saying they're not supernatural, otherwise why would they be living in the woods and have to be fed blood? If they're supernatural, they're spirits, they don't need to eat physical food at all. They've got no stomach or anything to eat, digest it, they wouldn't need it. No, these are beings, these are creatures, intelligent enough to be able to communicate with human priests, and they live in the woods. And by this kind of communion with devils, they were able to prophesy and foretell things to come. So it's made them smart. The consumption of blood made them clever enough to foretell the future. Isn't adrenochrome supposed to be present in the blood of victims who've been terrified before they've been slaughtered? And doesn't the consumption of adrenochrome give you superhuman levels of intelligence and psychic powers, at least temporarily? Things that you could use to predict the future. The rabbi says they thought their demons esteemed it such a favor and obligation to be treated in this manner that they, the demons, the devils, whatever these devils are, we're going to come to that in a minute, they would in the wild and open places where they haunted, so the devils haunted the wild and open places, and which therefore were made choice of for the performance of these superstitious rites. They choose the blood sacrifice and the communion with devils in the woods, in Cannock Chase, in the woods that Sv3rige is always appearing in. When he makes his monologues, his predictions for the future, he's showing you how smart he is. Why? Because you just saw he was drinking blood in the woods, and that's what it does. They appear visibly to them and foretell them anything that they had an inclination to know. So these beings are able to visibly appear. Now, if you watch a lot of Hollywood movies and TV, like everybody has, you're going to think that they somehow materialize out of smoke and this sort of devil appears, right? But that won't happen, I guarantee it. But what will happen is, I'll show it actually happening. It's disguised, but what they're doing is the same thing. And then Valancy adds this. Thus Horace describes Canidia and Sagana performing these rites, right? And then he's got it in Latin there. So I've got the translation here into English. This is from Horace, the Roman writer, describing the same thing going on in a Roman society. It was no longer than last night that I saw Canidia in a short black gown with her petticoats tucked up, her feet naked. Right, if you remember, I said go and look up the tabernacle in Wikipedia. The priest has to have naked feet when he performs the ritual of sacrifice in the tabernacle, which I've said is these things called chums, which are the tabernacles, the teepee structures that you find in the woods everywhere. France, Germany, England, you name it, America. So she had naked feet, and her hair was loose upon her shoulders. The old witch Sagana was with her. They howled horribly. Okay, so they were calling. Who goes into the woods and howls horribly, hoping that a devil will appear? I'm going to show you the Bigfoot researchers. The Bigfoot researchers, they go into the woods, they howl, they make these whooping sounds, and they say it will attract the Bigfoot. They scratched up the earth with their nails, and having made a little pit, they filled it with the blood of a black lamb, which they tore to pieces with their teeth. How many times have you seen Sv3rige in the woods eating a piece of raw meat, tearing it to pieces with his teeth? Notice he doesn't use a knife and fork. It doesn't say knife and fork. You see, you tear it to pieces with your teeth. This done, they solemnly invoke the infernal spirits. Infernal, meaning from below. You're supposed to believe, when you interpret this, the TV and everything have programmed you to think of infernal as some kind of alternative parallel universe, like another dimension. This is not what it means. It means from under the ground, underground caverns, whom they used to consult upon all occasions. Mention of crows again, and it goes on. Hid them secretly in the ground, so they're caching stuff, yeah, burying it in the ground. I've seen so many Bigfoot videos where they go into the woods and they say, oh, we found a little cache. Look, some weird stuff hidden in the ground. Who does that? That's Bigfoot, isn't it? It matches exactly what the Druids were doing, and it matches exactly what Sv3rige is doing every day, but he's dressing up as normal. So are all these Bigfoot researchers. They go into the woods, they go to where the teepee structures are, whatever. They make these howling sounds to attract the Bigfoot. How many places do you know that's called like Devil's Canyon or Devil's Creek? Here in England we have loads of places called Devil's this, Devil's that. Hob this, Hob that. Hob is a type of devil. They're all in the wild open places or in the forest, the wilderness. I'm talking about Bigfoot. It's a living creature. It's not from another dimension. There are no other dimensions. There's only reality. They're physical beings. They live in caves underground. These people worship them as gods. This is Pan, when you see the satyr in the woods. Hairy man creature. That's Bigfoot. It's a living thing. It's a real thing. A wild man. Now this next bit is important because one of the important witches' gods that they make sacrifice to is called Luna, also known as Hecate or Isis. So let's look, we do a search through here. How many times is Luna mentioned in this book about the Druids? At some point, maybe it's not this book, he gives a list of all the names of this goddess, and it's Isis, Hecate, and Luna. But I don't think it's this particular copy that I've got. Anyway, you get the idea. Luna's a pagan name for a pagan goddess who they go to the woods and make sacrifice to. Well, Sv3rige is always in the woods with his girlfriend, Luna. I mean, Luna's not exactly a common name, is it? I've never met a girl called Luna in my whole life. It's a kind of new age hippie parents' name that they would choose for their daughter. Why? Because they are pagan druids. She's obviously tolerant of his behavior, his going into the woods, drinking blood, and doing all the other things like tearing raw meat apart with his bare teeth, etc. Why would she be into that unless she was brought up in it? This next bit's very important too. Let me explain. Well, I just explain one thing here. Hemp seed is sown by the maidens, and they believe that if they look back, they will see the apparition of the man intended for their future spouse. So, supernatural powers coming from hemp. Right, this is the cannabis activism. This is where it comes from. Hemp. That's Shiva's plant. That's his drug. Okay, so in the notes here, it says the she, an apparition, the apparition of these spirits. And it says fire, ether, etc. But we were just talking about the apparition, the appearance of these spirits or these devils. Now, this word she is very important. It's used to describe the fairies, the fairy folk, and it's also a word in Sanskrit called siddha, somebody who's attained superhuman powers, supposedly through religious practice, meditation or yoga or whatever, but this person is a superhuman, a siddha. It's spelled almost exactly the same as this word sidh in Irish, which is pronounced she, but you can see it's the same word, it's spelled the same. In Ireland, the people of the She, the Banshee, the Lady of the She, or the Far She, the Man of the She, these are supposedly, in mythology, or in ancient times, people with superhuman powers, supermen, superheroes, a race of beings that were giants more often than not, and they could have superhuman strength, and they could leap extra far or run extra fast or whatever. And the burial mounds that you find in Ireland, and exactly the same as the ones they have in North America, these serpent mounds or burial mounds that you're not allowed to dig into because the Indians, they consider them to be religious ancestral burial mounds. But how do you know if you're not allowed to dig into them? How do you know they're burial mounds? How do you know there's a dead body buried in there? We've got the same mounds in England, same everywhere. They're called she, and people think that she means people of the Banshee, Lady of the Hills, because these she are little hills. El Cid, the Spanish hero. Cid is spelled completely differently from she, but you can see it if that's written Cid there. Siddha, El Cid. The name actually means Superman or the superhero, because that's what they're talking about, a superhuman being. It's the same word as she in Irish and siddha in Sanskrit. Who are these people? They are the Bigfoots. The Bigfoots live underground. These burial mounds are off limits. You're not allowed to touch them because they are covering up the entrances to where they come out of. They would go in there, they would make sacrifices, give them a bit of blood to drink, some food, and the Bigfoots would appear and eat the food. It's called gifting in modern day Bigfoot research. You're just dealing with an animal, a troglodyte. But they're extra strong, they're bigger than us. They're more like a gorilla in terms of their strength. In fact, superior to a gorilla. They have to be. They have a really rough lifestyle living outdoors or underground. This is what I'm talking about. So we look for Hecate, names of Hecate. Greek goddess of witchcraft. Let's see if we can find the names of Hecate so you know I'm not just making this up. Hecate has many names. And there we go, look, Luna. Okay, that's all we got time for in this video. I'm going to get into it a little bit more. In my next video, I'll explain why Bigfoot is God, or one of the words for God that they have in the Bible. Because as I've already explained, the King James Bible, they make everything out like it's all talking about God, but sometimes they're talking about Elohim, sometimes they're talking about the Logos, sometimes they're talking about something else. Yahweh, what is Yahweh? Who is Yahweh? I'm going to explain who Yahweh or Yahweh is, or Yahoo is, in the next video. So I hope you enjoyed it, and catch you next time.